Hi folks, I'm really happy to be here with you. I am enjoying myself right now because I am building out content for the team section of my AI. And in advance of having everything professionally filmed and so on, I'm just creating some videos. The content is what matters, not the magnificence with which it might be presented. But at any rate, the concept of empowerment. An empowered individual is one who is not frozen behind a wall of fear. An empowered individual is one who is able to make choices and act upon those choices. An empowered individual is one who is very concerned about what he or she thinks of themselves. They're very concerned about what God thinks about them, but they're not overly concerned about what other people think about them. An empowered individual most frequently finds his way or her way into various leadership roles in various industries and companies and concepts. And so now as we create a leadership structure, and by the way, that is the business that I'm in. People ask me all the time, Randy, what do you do? Well, today I can honestly say that I'm in an affiliate business that delivers artificial intelligence to individuals and companies, and that would be 1,000% correct. In another way, what do? I look for people of goodwill and intent who want more and who are willing to learn more, gather more knowledge, develop new skills and new character attributes to become more, because once one becomes more, that is when he or she, in fact, becomes eligible to have more. And in this particular session, I wanted to contemplate on the facets of empowerment. Now, what is it that causes a person to be able to do that which others cannot do because they're frozen behind their wall of fears? And I talk about facets because what is a facet? Well, one of the descriptions or one of the definitions is that it's every cut and polished surface on a gemstone which reflects brilliance. And so if we think of each of us as a raw stone which needs to be cut and polished, the facets of empowerment are those things which would cause us to be able to produce at a higher level than is typical. And so what exactly are the facets of empowerment? Well, first is education. We cannot act upon knowledge that we don't have. And so my question for each of you is, to whom do you turn today to gather knowledge? Where does it come from? Do you allow yourself to learn by accident? Do you require of yourself to learn on purpose? Are you making conscious daily decisions which will result in this first facet of empowerment being more well expressed in you? And to the extent that you do, then things will get better for you in all aspects of life. John Maxwell correctly stated that everything rises and falls on leadership. There's not enough leadership to go around. Not in families, not in churches, not in businesses, not in governments. Leadership's important. We must become more if we want to express more and deeper and more beneficial skills and attributes for other people. So the first facet of empowerment is to become educated. And so I contemplate and I think, who are the people that I listen to that allow me to become more? Well, I study leadership. And when I said I study it, that doesn't mean that I just take a glancing blow. I study, I dive in. And I've studied military leaders, certainly not because I'm one who is in favor of conflict, if at all it can be avoided, but it is one of the expressions of leadership. And when I've studied leadership, I've studied, for example, the Battle of Midway in the Pacific Second War was an extraordinarily important battle as it related to the overall outcome of that war. And it's an absolute fascinating study to review the Battle of Midway, authored by Jeff Simons, and there are many, but that is one that does a beautiful job of describing all that happened there from the American perspective. And then one could also watch one called, I think it's The Silver Waterfall. Forgive me, I may have missed that name, but it is authored by Fuchida, who was one of the lead pilots in the attack on Pearl Harbor. And so it's his description of that same series of events from a very, very different perspective. But it is absolutely eye-opening to study the leadership, to study the decisions made by Chester Nimitz, and to contemplate and consider what those outcomes were, to study the decisions made by Admiral Yamamoto on the other side of the Pacific, this study of leadership. While I've never been involved in armed conflict and hope never to be, the study of that leadership has grown my knowledge and understanding of what it means to be a benevolent leader versus one who is forcing others to do what they must do. Chester Nimitz was an example of a benevolent leader, an individual that people loved, and those under his command became more because of their love and admiration and respect for that benevolent leader. One of the greatest greatest examples of leadership that I've studied so much, and I recount the story so often, is that story of Nehemiah from the Old Testament, the greatest example I can think of benevolent leadership. Dwight D. Eisenhower, again, as part of my study of military leaders, Dwight D. Eisenhower stated that the art and essence of leadership is causing other people to do what we want them to do because they want to do it. Now, you see, that's very different than a form of leadership that is expressed because one has a certain stripe on their shoulder and they can compel others to do certain things. And so the type of leadership that I hope to develop and that I hope to help other people develop is that benevolent leadership, again, best described by General Eisenhower, at that time general, not president, when he said that the art and essence of leadership is causing other people to do what we want them to do because they want to do it, not because we're compelling them to do so. And so in my study of leaders, I have gathered new knowledge, and I've learned how to behave differently than I might otherwise have behaved had I not studied. And it's not just military leaders. One of the leaders that I've studied a great deal, it's an interesting one because obviously I'm not African, I'm not African American, but the writings and the lectures of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. have impacted me like very, very few others have. And one of his messages, one of his talks is called A Knock at Midnight. And of course, the knock at midnight is drawn from a biblical text. And it teaches us all something that we need to know and understand. If we're trying to launch a new venture, if we're trying to have a breakthrough personal, financial leadership, if we're trying to really accomplish something dramatically different than we've accomplished before, then I encourage you to listen to the audio story of Dr. Martin Luther King telling the tale of A Knock at Midnight. And so now I'll describe the message for you, and I certainly won't do it nearly so eloquently as he did, and it probably will not impact you the way that he impacted me. But the story is, the knock comes at midnight, and so of course we know that it's the middle of the night. And remember, this is now some 2,000 years ago. This is one of the teachings of Christ, and he's telling the story of the knock at midnight. And so there is a man, and remember, this is 2,000 plus years ago, and the vast majority of people would be living in one-room homes and so on. And this was not is not described as an affluent area. And so I'm guessing that this man and his family are in a one-room home. And at midnight comes a knock, and the person who is knocking at the door, he's saying to the master of the house, "Could you please give me a loaf of bread? I am hungry and I need a loaf of bread." And the master of the house from inside, he just calls out to the person knocking at the door, and he says, "It is late and I'm in bed with my family. Please go away." But the knock came again, another knock, and again the voice from outside, "But I'm hungry and I need a loaf of bread. I need to feed my family too. Please share with me from your excess." And from inside again comes the response, "It's midnight. I'm in bed with my family, with my wife and my children. Go away." And yet another time, the knock at midnight. And as the knock at midnight comes, then the master of the house again said, "Go away." And the knock came again. And at that point, the master of the house got up and he came and he handed him the loaf of bread. And then it says, "And it was because of the importunity of the one knocking that the master of the house got up and provided the loaf of bread." Because of his importunity, because he didn't quit, because the person outside knocking at the door had a goal, an objective that was bigger than the obstacle that he faced. That's maybe the most important lesson I've learned in my life, not just my business career, in my life as it relates to accomplishment. If our desire to accomplish the goal is greater than the obstacles that we encounter, then we will in all likelihood accomplish that objective or some part of it. If, on the other hand, we encounter any obstacle that is bigger than our desire, then the party's over. Then at that point, we lost the race. And so the man that was outside knocking at the door, he simply had a greater desire for that loaf of bread than the inconvenience of knocking and knocking and knocking. And so the message for me is very clear, and I hope the message is clear for you. It is that if we want to accomplish something great, then we must simply continue to knock. And that continuing to knock, that may mean that we just make one more contact on a daily basis than we otherwise would. Maybe it means that we follow up one more time with a person who's not yet acted. But we just continue to knock. You see, the moment we stop knocking, had had the person at the door stopped knocking, then obviously the master of the house would never have got up and given him the bread. And so the lesson in A Knock at Midnight is simply this: because of his importunity. And so the message is that we should each determine the validity of the project, of the quest that we are about, determine the validity thereof, and to the extent that it is valid, not just valid, but good and beneficial for both sides of the equation, whatever the equation is. So long as it's good and beneficial for, I should not even say both sides, but all sides of the equation, then we should simply continue to knock. We should simply have enough importunity to continue to knock, as opposed to retreating from the possibility. And so, again, the idea, or not the idea, but exactly what I'm doing is building out preliminary content for the team section of my AI. And one of the lessons is about the facets of empowerment, because if you look around your world right now, your current level of success or lack thereof is a direct result of your current level of empowerment. That's true. And maybe we should look another way. Your current level of success is the result of your empowerment for the last several years. Whatever your level of empowerment has been for the last, let's just call it a decade. If your level of empowerment was very, very high, then today you are a leader of some substance in a venture of some importance. If your empowerment has been relatively low over the course of that decade, then it would be very, very surprising to me to find out that your total life outcomes today are substantially changed from your total life outcomes a decade ago. If we want to have an improved outcome in the future, what we must do is improve our level of empowerment. The first facet of empowerment is education. We cannot act upon information that we do not have. And so, because I certainly don't think that I'm all that, I don't think that I have all of the answers. I know there's a lot more to be learned that I don't know. But because my objectives are greater than any obstacle that I've yet run into, then what I've chosen to do is to push myself hard against the grinding wheel of life and continually put myself in the audience of skilled leaders. And when I say in the audience, that does not mean that I'm face-to-face with them. I've never been face-to-face with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and yet he's impacted me in so many ways. I cited Knock at Midnight. Other just little bullet points that have stuck in my head as a result of listening to that particular man speak. He said, the time is always right to do right. Wow, that's a simple thought, isn't it? The time is always right to do right. And at one point he was asked, Dr. King, who are your favorite authors? And he said, well, there are 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, I've sought out and I've chosen to whom I will listen. I decided some long number of years ago that I refuse to learn by accident. I can learn by accident by letting Google lead me where it wants to go. I want to learn about all the hate and anger and bitterness in the world and the cruelty. Or I can be intentional in whom I choose to listen to. And with that thought in mind, I remember an experience that I had talking about this idea of empowerment, the ability to do more. The ability to do more because we are becoming more at each step of the way. As most of you know, if you didn't know until now you will know, I spent much of my life being almost crippled with drug addiction and alcoholism. It was really bad for quite a while. And now, thank God, God's been especially kind to me. I've been drug and alcohol free for a long time, and I don't really have any lasting negative results from that. Again, God's been unbelievably kind to me. But at a time when I was sober but not safely recovered, I knew that I had to put myself in a safe environment for a period. And I went and I stayed for a number of months at a Carmelite monastery in Southern California. And I was not even a Catholic, but I went and I stayed at a Carmelite monastery. And each morning, at 4:45 a.m., the sisters, I called them the girls, the sisters would sing the morning office. And at 4:45, I would be sitting in the chapel. And as they would sing the morning office, every day I would get tears in my eyes. And one day, Mother Regina Marie, the Mother Superior, and I were chatting, and she said, so Randy, I see that you have tears in your eyes most mornings that you're here. And she said, do you know what's going on? And I said, well, I'm having emotions. Well, she said, yeah, but do you know what's going on? I said, I'm not really sure. She said, well, a couple of things are happening. First, she said, look around this chapel. It's a little tiny chapel. It's been around for a long time. She said, look around this chapel. She said, the walls of this chapel are drenched in prayer. And that's what you're feeling. You are feeling the beseeching of so many people who came imploring God to help them with a problem, imploring God to solve a challenge, imploring God to heal an ill one. And she said it's soaked with the prayers of those who come here to ask. And she said there's value to that. Then she said there's another thing. There are people who came here to thank. And so these walls are also soaked in prayer, not just of those who are there to ask for help, but said these walls are soaked in prayer with those who have come to offer gratitude for prayers answered or for positive outcomes. And then she said there's one more kind. So this is the highest, the most evolved state of prayer. And so this is what really makes this place feel the way that it feels to you when you walk in. And she said, these are the prayers of praise that soak these walls from those who came to praise and glorify God because of his ability to solve the problems of those who knocked at midnight. And so she said, that's one thing that's happening, and that imagery's always stayed with me. And I will tell you right now that if you're in our home, you walk in and it feels a certain way, and if you ever wonder what it is, it's because these walls are drenched in prayer, folks. That's why it feels the way that it feels when you walk into our home, because these walls are drenched in prayer. And they're drenched in all three kinds of prayer, in literally begging God to help in times of profound need, in thanking God for having helped, or in thanking God for having not chosen to help in ways that we didn't understand. And then finally in praising God for the very act of being God. These walls are soaked in prayer. Let it be that the day comes when you feel the same sense of peace and ease and comfort that happens when you walk into a spiritual edifice. Let it be that that is the way your entire life feels. That will be a facet of empowerment that enables you to interact with others in such a way where we don't find fault in their faults, where we don't find failing in their failings, but where we find humankind, each of whom are doing their best at a given moment in time. And as I continue this particular line of thinking, I reference the fact that I struggled with drugs and alcohol for a long time, and in my early recovery when I was having such a difficult time, and so many parts of my life were really difficult. I was invited to read page 417 of the third edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and forgive me, I'm sure I'll quote it wrong, but it's broadly accurate. It says, whenever I'm disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way that it's supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. And it goes on. Well, I've wrapped my arms around that completely and totally and absolutely, that nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And so while some things may be extraordinarily difficult for me to understand at the time, I've come to believe that there is a divine purpose in all. And so when I was first, that was steadily thrust upon me. Randy, accept it. Randy, accept it. Randy, but things are awful. Randy, accept it. Because we want you to be happy now, these being the people who are helping me get sober. Accept it, Randy, that right now you've got all kinds of challenges in your life. Accept that that's the way it's supposed to be. Because if you don't accept it, then you'll be unhappy. But then I was taught this next wonderful thought. But Randy, you need not accept that it will always be that way. If you're unhappy because your relationships are fractured, well then conduct yourself in a different way and foster better relationships in the future. It doesn't have to be that way. If you're frustrated about your economic realities, well, learn how to manage money differently. Embrace the 5 laws of gold taught by George S. Clason. Learn the difference in investing and speculating. Stop spending more money than you make. You see, if I'm not satisfied with a current situation, I want to be happy anyway. And so I must accept it as being exactly the way it's supposed to be at this moment. But I do not need to accept that that's the way that it will be tomorrow. It can be better. Why? Because I can get up early, I can stay up late, I can make one more phone call, and I can continue knocking like the man who knocked at midnight. And because of my importunity, then my life experience has shown me that ultimately the door will be opened. Knock and it will be opened. That is my experience. And then, before I leave my Carmelite monastery, it was one of those mornings when I was having coffee with the Mother Superior, Mother Regina Marie. She handed me a book, and that book was entitled The Interior Castle, written by Teresa of Avila in the year 1588. And in 1588, Teresa of Avila said, the world has become so full of anger and bitterness and conflict that literally our souls have been seared so they cannot let in more light. With the imagery being that if it's dark inside and I walk out to the bright light, my pupils will constrict, because if they let in more light, then it will hurt. If I'm walking out of the darkness, too much light at once would hurt. Then she gives the imagery that if I am outside and I walk inside, now my pupils will need to dilate to let in more light. They'll need to open more. And she said, literally, our souls have become seared. They can't let in more light. And then she described things that we could do that would cause our souls to dilate so they could let in more light. Once my soul is dilated, lets in more light, then I can see and even feel the needs of others. If my soul is constricted, then I will be stuck in the saddest place, that being self-centered selfishness, thinking about me. To the extent that I'm thinking about me, I'm going to be dissatisfied. To the extent that my soul becomes dilated so that suddenly I can see and feel the needs of others instead of my own selfish interests, then things are different. And so I've identified the things that I can do to dilate my soul. I hope that each of you already know the things that dilate your soul. If you don't, I hope that you'll poke and prod around a little bit and discover them. For me, though I kind of hard for some people to understand, I've always viewed myself as an underdog. Always, in every undertaking, I've always viewed myself as the underdog. And so whenever I watch anyone or anything that is an underdog do extremely well, then that dilates my soul. When I watched Susan Boyle on Britain's Got Talent, no one was rooting for her, nobody. There was almost zero chance. And see, that's the next lesson. If we focus on that which is likely, we're going to be restless, irritable, discontent, or outright unhappy. That's what it'll be if we focus on that which is likely. On the other hand, if we focus on that which is possible, having no concern whatsoever for that which is likely, then we can have very, very different experiences. With the same set of realities, we can have very different understandings and experiences that come from that. Well, when I watched Paul Potts with his initial audition in Britain's Got Talent, when I watched Susan Boyle, when I watched the group Calabro. Another example is Zenyatta is a racehorse. And Zenyatta is the only thoroughbred in history to win 19 races in a row. And unbelievably, Zenyatta won the Super Bowl of horse racing in 2009. And that Super Bowl of horse racing, that's called the Breeders' Cup. And once a year, there's a variety of different races. And it's the specialists at 6 furlongs and the specialists at 8 furlongs. And those are the sprints. And then there's the 1 mile, and there's the maidens, and there's the colts, and each age, and then there's the final. It's just the best. And in the history of the Super Bowl of horse racing, no filly has ever won running against the stallions. I mean, notwithstanding all that goes on today in sports and all the discussions of male, female, and so on, the God's honest truth is that males are genetically stronger than females, and the strongest female will have different capacities in some areas of greater strength than a man could ever have, but in terms of just simple physical strength, then it will not be as great as the male. And so there's a reason why no filly has ever won the Breeders' Cup, because it's almost impossible. But if you watch that, and I hope you'll all do, then you'll see Zenyatta running from the back of the pack, the only female in a male-dominated cast, and Zenyatta wins in about the most thrilling form ever seen. You see, things like that, they're encouraging to me. Whenever I see someone or something do something that is better than is imaginable, but defies human description, if it defies human description, then that means there must be a spark of the divine involved somewhere, and that is what dilates my soul. It dilates my soul. There are other things that dilate my soul. Part of my daily routine is that I pray the rosary, and I am a Catholic, and I pray the rosary at night with Bosco. And that's when he's our little boy. For those of you who don't know, he's 8. And one of the things that dilates my soul is that's part of my routine with Bosco. Each evening we pray the rosary together. It dilates my soul when I ask Bosco, tonight is it the luminous, the joyful, the glorious mystery? And I've kept it limited to that so far. I've not brought him into the sorrowful ones. We'll do that later on, but not yet. And it dilates my soul when he can just chime them right off, and when he knows what they are, and he joins with me in that prayer. So find the things, each of you find the things that just make you feel better, that fill you up, that put a tear in your eye, that give a catch in your breath. And behind that experience, cobwebs will have cleared, and we can then see with clarity things that we could not see before. Well, the first facet of empowerment is education. It's to know and to understand things that we don't know and understand yet. We can do this by studying leaders. We can do it by listening to gifted people speak about leadership attributes. we can gain this education by listening to, watching, interacting with people who express excellence in a variety of ways, with the only filter that I put on it being, is this person expressing benevolent leadership, or is this a forced leadership? Reflecting again on Dwight D. Eisenhower's, I think, brilliant description of what leadership is. He says the art and essence of leadership is causing other people to do what we want them to do because they want to do it. And if any of you here have not listened to the audiobook Running with the Giants by John C. Maxwell, listen to it tonight and there learn the story of Nehemiah and learn what it means to be a benevolent leader. Learn what is required to empower others such that he or she can do in the next few moments what they could not do a few moments ago, and creating breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough. Well, the first facet of empowerment is education. And I've made a conscious decision to try very hard to learn more so that I can be more, so that I can do more, so that I can have more, so that I can help other people more as a result of these facets of empowerment. The next facet is motivation. If I'm educated, that's a beautiful thing. But if I don't act upon that education, if the knowledge is not put to good use and practice, then what is the real ultimate gain? Not so much. And so the world, of course, is full of wonderful people, highly educated, who for whatever reason don't ever break through. The most extraordinarily educated, brilliant minds, so many don't break through financially. And there are so many ways to express success and to be successful in life that are not tied to money. But of course, that's a scorecard that most of us are familiar with. And so the question is, why would it be, if education is such an important facet of empowerment, why would not the most highly educated always be the most successful? Well, there's more to it. Then there's the second facet of empowerment is motivation. Simply becoming willing or able to do for the next few minutes something that I was not able to do a few minutes before. It doesn't require more skill. It doesn't require more knowledge. It requires more willingness. But there has to be something that causes me to become more willing than I was willing a moment ago. Some outside source of motivation. Now, this is why I constantly put myself in environments where I get to observe others expressing excellence. That is motivating for me. When I observe someone else express excellence. When someone joins our company, as an example, when someone joins our company and they start out by expressing to me some degree of financial fear. They've got some pressing, urgent need. Okay. Most people do. Okay, there's nothing remarkable about that. You know what's remarkable? It's when every once in a while, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's when every once in a while someone mentions the pressing need only sort of in passing because they have determined a path to follow to create the outcome. And say when someone expresses to me in a new member orientation all of their financial fear, okay, I hear it, but you know what's motivating to me? Is when the next day that person calls and says, hey Randy, remember yesterday you told me that with the acquisition bonus I could make $50 every time I enrolled a new person? My objectives long term are to make a fortune at this and have a great big residual income. But Randy, today I made $250 so that I could pay the bill I was worried about yesterday, because I went out and I met with 5 people and I rolled them in LAI. That is motivating to me. It is when I observe someone become willing to take action to overcome the problem instead of being frozen behind the wall of fear and allowing the problem to wash over them and ultimately, unfortunately, drown them and failing to cause that breakthrough. It is so incredibly motivating to me when I hear a person who says, but Randy, I have not had great success before. I have not had the kinds of results that other people have had. And it's because I have this problem, that problem, the next one. But today, finally, my desire for success has become greater than the obstacles that I encounter or that I will encounter in the future. Therefore, because of my importunity, I have become willing to do that which others are not willing to do. And folks, this is the key. When people ask me, what is the single most prevalent attribute in those who have tremendous breakthroughs? I think it would surprise many to find out that the attribute is not knowledge, the attribute is not skill, the attribute is not some personal characteristic, save this one, it is about willingness. When we contemplate the first 5 proposals that are required to create a proper foundation to build a business upon, the first one is simply to enroll, in our case, in LevAI, and to create a mental and emotional barrier of exit that is greater than the obstacles that we overcome. Does that take any skill? No. Does it take any character attribute? No. What does it take? It just takes willingness, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of willingness. That's all. That's all that it takes. Now, if we move on down the line, if the first activity, if the requisite, the determining factor in our ultimate results is simply going to be, do we give success a chance? Remember, so many years ago, John Lennon wrote a song and he said, all I'm saying is give peace a chance. And all I've been saying for years is give success a chance. And I recognize this, that the person that you've not yet talked to, they already don't use our product, they're not involved in our business. Well, that's as bad as it can get. It can't get any worse than that, right? I mean, that's the way that I feel whenever I talk to somebody new. They already don't use our product. They're already not involved in our business. If I talk to them, then they might. And so I just give success a chance. It can't possibly get worse. It'll just get better, maybe. Maybe not, but maybe so. And take another step. It will get better. Why? Because the skill to do comes from the doing. And so even if that initial outreach didn't result in the person joining me in the business, did I lose? No, I still won. See, I already didn't have that person as a customer. I already didn't have them as a partner in the business, and so that didn't change. What did change? My skill level went up a little bit. Why? Because I did. And Cicero said the skill to do comes from the doing, and because I did, my skill level went up. And so whether or not I got the new person involved in the business or the new person using the product, I still won. And so what I have to do is I have to find some source of outside motivation that causes me to become willing and able to do the next few minutes that which I was not willing to do before. And this, that I've taught ad nauseum, it has been so important in my life. This idea of creating short-term empowering behaviors such that we are able to do for the next few minutes what we couldn't do before. And you folks know the various things that I do. I teach them so much. I know when I was earlier in my life and I was trying to break through as a stockbroker and I just wasn't making enough calls because I was frozen behind a wall of fear. I went and I watched the first Rocky movie and I remember sitting there thinking, wow, if I felt like this, as Sylvester Stallone ran up the stairs to the Philadelphia Library, and I'm hearing the music and it goes like this, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum, bum. And I thought, wow, if I felt like this, I could make the phone calls that would lead to success. And so I stopped on the way back and I got a Sony Walkman and I started listening to a few bars of Gonna Fly Now in advance of every call. Then I could make 2 calls, then I could make 3, then I could make 5, then I could make 10. Then the skill started to come as a result of the doing, and I started becoming more successful. A year and a half into it, here comes Rocky 3, and what happened? Bum, 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 bum. Listen to just a few bars that elevates me to the highest vibration I can be, and it's so easy to do for the next few moments, something that I was actually unable to do a few moments before. And so and by the way, I teach me and I let you listen. I don't believe that I'm all that, and I don't think I know a darn thing that you guys don't know. I talk to me and I let you listen. As I talk to me, I'm trying to get myself closer and closer to that center line. I'm trying to make possible my next greatest success as a result of helping you experience your greatest success. And along the way, I've always adopted short-term empowering behaviors. That's never changed. And I still use today the ones that I used years ago. I still listen to the eye of the tiger before every important function of any kind. Well, not of any kind. Let me take that back. I also have short-term empowering behaviors that would not be, I have short-term empowering behaviors to meet other parts of my life. I don't think it would be really appropriate if Samantha and I were having a conversation about Bosco's future that was a really important conversation. Maybe it has to do with, is he going to go to private school or public school? Is he going to go to Catholic school? Is he going to go to some other school? Are we going to, all these kinds of decisions and choices that are important for his future. Do you suppose it'd be really good for me to listen to bum, 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 bum? Now, Samantha. No, of course not. That's not going to go very far. So on the other hand, my short-term empowering behaviors to make me able to hear. You see, I need to be able to hear as clearly as I can speak. And when I say a short-term empowering behavior allowing me to do that which I could not do a few moments ago, maybe that means just listening. Maybe it means being quiet. That would be a different kind of an empowering behavior. That would be more like listening to Susan Boyle sing and getting a tear in my eye. That would be reflecting again upon the various experiences I had with those sisters at the Carmelite Monastery. You see, in either case, those then make it possible for me to do for the next few minutes what I could not do a few minutes before, while expressed and felt very differently, both motivating me and causing me to be able to act. And then Cicero's born out to be true, to be correct again, when he said so many years ago, the skill to do comes from the doing. And as a result of short-term empowering behaviors making me able to do, because I do more, I develop more skill. Because I develop more skill, I have more self-confidence, more poise, a more correct self-esteem. And suddenly I'm no longer frozen behind the wall of what does somebody else think of me. The very moment we can get past the wall of fear, surrounded by what does somebody else think of me. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that that part of my life is gone today. I want you to like me, but if you don't, I'm okay with that because I'm really comfortable with the life choices that I'm making. And so if someone chooses to find fault with them, I'm okay with that. It's none of my business. It just doesn't matter. I'm very concerned about what I think about me. I'm very concerned with what God thinks about me. And I'm concerned about what my children and my closest friends think about me. But that's about the size of it. That's just about the size of it. That took a lot of empowerment, a lot of change in order for the thought of what somebody else thinks about me. That stopped me from having so much success because I stood outside the door and didn't knock until I no longer cared what someone else thought. I encourage you to make that one of your targets. So now, if I've found a way to gather new education, maybe I'm listening to audiobooks, I'm watching the correct and important YouTube videos or whatever the video sources are. I've made a conscious decision to learn more, and I act upon that decision daily. If I have a strategy that has only one logical outcome, a strategy of causing me to become more willing to do that which is required to succeed. And I do, I have a strategy. I don't allow myself to not do. I require of myself to do the things which will predictably cause greater outcomes, and I simply refuse to allow myself to engage in behaviors that would be self-defeating or that have been proven over time to not create the outcomes I want. Now that has happened because I have adopted a series of behavioral patterns over the course of each day, starting early and ending late. Early when, and not late, I don't go to bed after, not late. But I would say that I probably invest a little bit more of my day than a lot of people do. I don't spend very much of it at all. I probably invest a little more of my day than many people do. And I invest my time in a very, very conscious way, leaving room for spontaneity, leaving room for the next surprise to come along and act upon that surprise. But having that spontaneity being held in its proper place in the overall continuum of behaviors, such that that which has been programmed and planned, while it can be disrupted, it cannot be permanently delayed. It can be disrupted. Sometimes spontaneity requires that. But very shortly after that disruption, must find my way back to the center line. Now, I've learned what the pattern of behaviors are and activities are that work for me to cause me to become willing to do just a little bit more on a daily basis than I was at an earlier time in my life. And while I don't ever want to compare myself to anyone, if I compare myself to anyone, then by definition, I'm going to be seeing myself as being better or them being better than me, each of which are incorrect perceptions. And so I have to be very, very careful that I'm comparing me to me. Not that I'm comparing me to you, not that I'm comparing me to anybody else. I'm comparing me to me. Am I better today in this aspect of my life than I was yesterday or a year ago or 10 years ago? Am I better today in this facet of my life than I was a year ago or 2 or 5? If so, then I'm winning. And that winds up being motivational. So if I'm educated and I know what to do, I've chosen various leaders and I choose to follow. And folks, it is not infrequent now that people refer to me as a leader. I'm grateful when that happens, but really what I am is a follower. I find people who are accomplishing what I want to accomplish, and then I do as closely as I possibly can what they teach me to do, and I don't second guess. I get myself on that pattern of activities and I just stay on it. I believe that deer are certainly more intuitive, maybe smarter than human beings. We live in an area where it's not unusual for us to have deep, deep snow out in our yard. We have a pretty big property, and so it's not unusual to see several deer, 20, 30 sometimes, walking in a line. Why did I say that deer are smarter and more intuitive than humans? Well, because if they're walking through 4 feet of snow, the second deer will be exactly in the path of the first deer. I mean, not approximately, I mean exactly in the path. Because he or she realizes there's a 1 foot outside of the path as though no path existed. And so 30 deer in a row, we walk on the exact same path that's only this wide. You put 30 humans out there and they are wandering all over the stinking lot. They're getting soaking wet. They're falling down the snow. Guys, find a leader that's going where you want to go. Get on the path and follow. Follow him or her. And don't stop following until it's become evident to you and to others around you that you have become more skilled at the very thing that leader taught you to do, and only then break around and plow your own path. Well, if I am educated and I know what to do, I have a degree of motivation that causes me to become willing to do those things required for success. Now, the only remaining facet of empowerment is there must be this measure of inspiration. And as I've talked about watching Zenyatta win, that was motivational, but also inspirational to me. She won a race that she wasn't supposed to win, that people would consider to be impossible for her to win. That means there's a spark of the divine. Whenever I'm in touch with the spark of the divine, that is empowering to me. That's what happens. I think of Paul Potts, and if you haven't seen Paul Potts on Britain's Got Talent, watch it tonight. It'll be empowering for you. It'll be encouraging. Swimming upstream against such seemingly insurmountable odds. Now, in my own case, I love the game of golf. I once played it quite well. I don't play it very well anymore, but I love the game of golf. If you don't care about playing golf, it means nothing to you. I still encourage you to go to YouTube and watch the 1986 back nine of the Masters. The Masters, 1986, the last 9 holes. And watch what Jack Nicklaus does. It's impossible. Folks, it's not difficult. It's not unlikely. It is impossible. But he did it. That once again, see, I find anyone or anything that does that which is unimaginably good, that is inspiring to me. And so the facets of empowerment are what? Education. I have to know what to do, and I have to learn something today I didn't know yesterday. I've got to learn something tomorrow I didn't know today. If I don't, then I'm stagnating. I'm becoming less, not more. I must adopt, embrace, and act upon proven processes which cause me to become not just willing, but eager to do things today that I was not willing to do yesterday, when I can replace a lack of willingness with willingness, and then I can replace willingness with eagerness to do that which I recoiled from. I am becoming an empowered individual. And now when we add to that, that's touch, that spark of the divine, that measure of inspiration, that is what assures that our behaviors, current and future, will be the behaviors of benevolent leadership, seeking to accomplish our objectives as a result of the widespread successes and periodic unbelievable breakthroughs of those who have opted in to our leadership. Folks, it is, and I know that there are some words that are really, really powerful words. I think sacred is a powerful word. I think promise is a powerful word. There are words like this that they stop me. If I promise, that's not the same as I will try to do that. If something is sacred, that to me implies that acting contrary to that which is sacred would be acting contrary to God the way that I understand God. Sacred is a really, really powerful word. I believe that there is a sacred obligation that goes along with leadership. There is a sacred obligation that goes along with leadership. Other people will accomplish their goals or not accomplish their goals based upon who is the leadership that they subscribe to. Because a true leader will have developed and learned how to express the facets of empowerment in such a way that it transfers to another. And if one walks into your world and they are lacking empowerment, but as a result of their interactions with you over the course of the coming days, weeks, months, and years, they become an empowered individual as a result of gaining and continuing forever to gather new knowledge, creating short-term strategies, short-term empowering behaviors to cause one to be able to act today in spite of the difficulties, ultimately developing the character attributes which remove permanently the self-centered fear which freezes us. Then you see there's no longer a need for external motivation. Now it is all internal, no longer motivation, but internal certainty in the correctness of behavior and in the likelihood, that likely idea, the promise of outcome that we seek. And now if we have an educated, motivated individual, we need only help that person find their way to a path that draws them every day just a tiny bit closer to God, the way that they understand God. And by the way, folks, the way that I vision that, think of a bicycle wheel, and in the center is the hub and all the spokes, and each of those spokes are individual pathways to God. The place where it goes wrong is if I or anybody else tries to impose my spoke on another. Now, I don't know which spoke is the right spoke. I found a spoke that makes me feel better. I encourage you to find a spoke that makes you feel better, and I believe that someday, one day, we'll all meet in the middle. Well, the facets of empowerment: education, grow yours; motivation, learn how to develop it, short-term and long-term; and inspiration, simply create a fiber optics conduit to deity the way that you see that deity, and never, ever, ever allow the circuit to break, and good things will happen. Folks, I could not be more thrilled than I am to be in association with you. There will be a continuing, endless stream of content loaded into the teams portion of Live AI. And my objective is this, and please don't misunderstand it when I say this. I think that the value proposition of Live AI is unlike anything I've ever seen. I think this is the screamingest deal I've ever seen. But now I'm just going to take the part that I can be responsible for. I want what is made available in the Teams session to be worth more than your monthly subscription fee is, if there is nothing else. That's what I want. And I'm completely confident of the ability to deliver that. Some myself and some bringing in other people to deliver it with me. But it is my absolute intention to deliver a quality of content that causes each person to have the opportunity, the legitimate, the real one, to learn, grow, develop, and become more, such that they can have tremendous financial breakthroughs and personal breakthroughs, separate and distinct from all that Live AI is. See, my goal is to create more than $100 in monthly value to pay for your subscription if Live AI was nothing but the Teams function and you participating with me in these sessions. And folks, I will tell you, the person who taught me the things that I would propose to teach you, I assure you it's worth a whole lot more than $100 a month. It's I can't express it to you probably with enough energy and emphasis on how grateful I am for having been taught the things that I've been taught by such gifted leaders. Folks, my time is spent. Let me take that back. The time that I have available to invest with you has now been invested, and I need to now break free because I've got a person coming to see me in a few moments who has asked me to help him learn the program of recovery and attempt to get and stay sober. And that's going to dilate my soul. And it's going to make me more able to do the next hour what I want to do, because it will get me out of myself. It will help me not see the problems according to Randy, but it's going to let me see the gifts that Randy's been given and the problems that I'm able to avoid as a result of somewhere along the way gaining the empowerment required to live life as I now live it versus the way that I used to live it. Everybody, God bless you. Have the best day yet. Let's make this an incredible weekend at Live AI. Let it be that we each enroll. Why not 2? How about if each of us enroll 2 between right now and Monday? And report back to me on that. Just report back when you go into the Teams function and let me know how the weekend went and how I can best assist. God bless everybody, and I'll see you along the way. Bye.